Okay, thanks for the intro. And it's great to be here in Kiev and present to you. So yeah, looking forward to it. So sorry, should I?
What?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. You should take this one.
Okay.
Just a little bit louder.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, can everyone hear me at the back?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, so my presentation's around the future research. To give you a bit of background, I've been doing SEO since 2003, so 15 years ago now, and it's kind of a good point to think about what will search look like in 15 years in the future. And I kind of find a lot of comparisons with where we started versus where we are now versus where we're going. And I'll share some examples. So my agency back in London focuses purely around SEO and content marketing, so I'll share some examples of where I see we are today in the UK market, and yeah, some predictions on where things are looking like they are going. So my first question is, how many people use Google every single day?
Everyone.
Yep, that's kind of what I thought. So the next question is, how many people think that Google will still be around in 15 years' time? So how many people think Google will be here in 15 years? I find, I'll come back to this, but in 2033, it's difficult to predict what the future holds. Right now, it's really difficult to understand the future without Google, but in order to look ahead, maybe things will change. So what I see as the key in terms of thinking to the future is a Steve Jobs quote, which is, you can't connect the dots by looking forward, you have to start by going back. And this is what I mean by understanding the future trends. You have to see what people have been doing over the years and understand where they're going. So right now, we're clearly in the information age. We have the wealth of world's knowledge within a few keystrokes. And what this means is that if you went back to, say, 1990, even 2000, to think that everyone could answer pretty much any question from their phone is crazy. And so thinking about where we've come from and where we've moved on from, certainly I was in Kiev, I think it's 4, maybe 5 years ago, talking about SEO. And I think we've moved on quite a bit from the days of white hat and black hat. And certainly, in terms of where that originated from, I don't know if anyone knows this, but it was from Western movies. So the white hat was the good guy, the black hat was the bad guy. And I think the conversation very much 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, was around how do you do black hat tactics in order to manipulate search. And now it's less of a conversation. It's much more around how do you build the best brand that in the long term is going to win. So I think it's interesting to see how things have already developed. And yes, links are still very important in terms of Google's search algorithm. But there's so much more to achieving great SEO today. It's definitely not just about how you can try to build links and hope everything else works. You have to have a well-rounded approach, for sure. It's also important to remember that when Google refine their algorithm, I find it's normally to achieve two things. So I've been asked for expert opinions quite a lot over the years around latest Google algorithm updates and what that means to people practicing SEO. And I started to look back over the trends, and when you understand why Google are making these changes, it becomes clearer in terms of where they're going. And the two trends that are most typical in terms of how I've answered those questions in something in the past, number one, is to improve the relevancy of results for searchers. So even this search for Google itself will be very different to what you would have had in the past. So you have site links below the number one listing, you have top stories and images, you'll have a knowledge graph result on the left-hand side, and this is constantly changing and evolving, and it's always for the reason to improve the relevancy of the results for Google. The second reason is to make more money. Google in the early days, obviously, they were there about trying to create the best search result possible, and they still are. However, their shareholders have a lot at stake, and every decision they make now is much more important from a financial position in terms of how they develop things. So essentially, they are looking to make things more relevant, but also make more money for their shareholders and profits to reinvest into their future growth. Again, a significant change here is it's now Alphabet, so kind of more of the group of companies of which Google sits. And again, that would be very different in terms of the very early days of Google before they were on the stock market. The sweet spot always achieves both. You can't just try and make more money and expect to be number one in the market. You have to put your customers first. But at the same time, there's a balance. So if you look back again at some of the updates that we've had in the past, you'll see that Google Panda update, for example, penalized thin and weak content to improve the quality of results. And ultimately, if Google are improving the quality of results, they will get more market share. The quality is high, and that means that they can get more of what they want to see from searchers. So Penguin is similar. Penguin will penalize, say, older school link building tactics and SEO tactics, and as a result kills off that side of things. Scares people away from SEO a little bit in terms of what they're doing, but certainly looks to clean up Google search results as the main reason for doing this. Google wants to see the brands at the top because the best brands and the best content are what they see as being deserving of being there. So again, that helps in order to provide a better experience, which maintains their market share. You then have ones that are perhaps a bit more direct, so the not provided organic keyword data being removed. Potentially, obviously it improves privacy, which is the key reason behind it. It also has a knock-on effect that you'll find that people are more encouraged to use PPC because you have PPC data, you know the stats that are coming through for your keywords, whereas in organic search, you don't always know. The 4 PPC ad blocks are similar. So again, these changes is a better mobile experience, but it increases advertiser income. So Google have to balance the two, and I'm not saying that's kind of right or wrong in terms of their strategy. It's more you need to think of this in terms of your strategy when it comes to SEO. So where is the focus on SEO today? And I think there's different ways of looking at this. Personally, technical SEO can sometimes get overlooked, and maybe it's seen as it's a fundamental, basic part of what you do. And I still see so many people doing this wrong. So there's big wins and normally quicker wins to be had from improving the technical SEO of your website. It's more valuable than ever. It's probably harder than ever and more complex in terms of crawling, page speed, secure servers, hreflang for internationalization, and there's a lot that can go wrong. And also, if you correct it and make it right, then you're going to see much more of a benefit. When it comes to almost modern link building, ideas and new currency, this is where you can create real digital PR value. And if you're doing so, I find that this is a much stronger approach. And if, let's say you had 100 articles and 100 different links that had no relation to each other, potentially that looks like an SEO footprint, which is the last thing anyone wants. If Google thinks that you've done SEO to manipulate your position in the search rankings, chances are that the next time they do a Google algorithm update, you might be caught from that. Whereas actually, if you have a great idea and a story which generates really strong PR attention, that spike in links is going to be much more natural because people are talking about you because you have a story to tell. So I think that's really important. And again, you could focus on links, but the brands that are really winning are the ones that are aiming for the moon. And quite literally, like Red Bull is a often used example of this. They put someone in space. It's a very extreme SEO campaign, and that's obviously not the reason they did it. SEO and links should be the byproduct of having great content. You should generate the value of PR reach, social engagement, traffic and awareness, and high quality links at the same time. and then you're in a much more defensible, stronger position in order to protect and strengthen where you are. So the goal is to make your content the best answer on the internet for any given question or search, and that's across all devices and platforms. You want to be in front of people wherever they are and providing the best result. We've done quite a lot of studies ourselves, testing things like title tags and meta descriptions, not for optimization, but for click-through rates. Google looks at if you have a ranking, and let's say it's number 8 in Google, and that is generating a stronger click-through rate than the number 5 position, you can get bumped up because people are seeing you as a more relevant result. The same applies the other way around. If it's not as strong as it could be, you could get relegated. So looking at how you can maximize the performance from your content is really key. The same also applies to engagement. So if people are clicking that listing, but they don't like it and they bounce back out to the next search result, Google also understands this and they'll see that perhaps that isn't as strong as it could be. So it's really important to make sure that, I mean, you should do this anyway, but you should make sure that the users are engaging with that content and you're maximizing the traffic from the click-throughs, because Google is a lot more sophisticated and smart versus where they have been in the past. And this is becoming a really important factor in terms of how to influence rankings and make sure you're generating the most that you possibly can. But you can't just look at what Google are doing today. You have to think about where they want to go. I often think sometimes their failed attempts can tell you as much as some of the things that have worked. So certainly Google Plus hasn't been the big success I'm sure they would have hoped it to have been. Google Wave came before that. Google Glasses, and then there's other things, self-driving cars. If you understand where Google are trying to get to, and it's much more than just paid and organic search for sure, you can then understand how you can align yourself with that and maximize where they're going. No one wants to be in the position where you're scared of the next algorithm update. You'd rather be in a stronger position where you're looking forward to it because you're doing things right and maybe your competitors will get caught out. And then that way, so when things change, you won't be left behind. You understand where things are going. You're not just chasing Google's algorithm and hoping for the best. You're in a very strong position. So to almost answer one of my earlier questions, when I started doing SEO, these were the most popular search engines. Does anyone remember AltaVista, Ask Jeeves, Lycos? Yahoo may have stayed around a bit longer, but is potentially kind of dying more of a slow death. And I think when you look back at this being, say, kind of 2000, 2003, this seems like ages ago. In many ways it was, but it was 15 years. So when you look 15 years into the future, do we think Apple, Facebook, Google, Twitter, Amazon will still be here? Normally, yes, but when you think about where we've come from and how quickly things change in an internet year, it's likely that at least one of them won't be here, and it's very likely that other people will have been up and coming. I mean, in between this time, MySpace has been and gone. Uber wasn't launched back even 10 years ago. Airbnb, so everything changes all the time. And what I'm saying is you can't rely on one source of traffic, because if that source of traffic disappears, again, you're in a weak position. It's about trying to understand where you can be for the long term. One interesting question Bill Gates got asked was, who is he most worried about? And everyone expected he would say Google, Amazon, Facebook. These are the obvious answers. And actually, he said it's not. It's the guy in the garage. It's the person who is working on something right now that you don't even know about. And they're hungry, they've got a passion, they've seen something that you haven't seen. They're not spending their days in board meetings and trying to keep up with the day-to-day. They're freeing up their time to really focus on their craft and doing something differently. And they're likely to be the winners when you look kind of 10, 15, 20 years ahead. How does that relate to the future of search? So I think quite clearly times have changed. I always try to look at user behaviors. back, and again, even 10 years ago, everyone thought of SEO as desktop search, probably less than that, five years, I think that's also true. Mobile has clearly taken over in terms of where a large percentage of traffic comes from. And it's not going to end there. So you can do searches from your home voice device, a headset, your fridge. It's crazy. So the Internet of Things, there's so many things that you can search from now that just wasn't an option in the past. One other question I want to put out there is it possible that in the future there'll be no such thing as websites? Again, to me, this sounds crazy. I can't see a future like this, and to be honest, when I started to put this presentation together, then that's when the light bulb moment happened of actually, this could happen. So there is a very possible chance that this will definitely happen. I think for sure, it won't just be website traffic that is being generated through search. So we already see this. So there's already results and featured snippets where you don't need to click a listing in order to find the answer you need. This was rolled out by Google just this week. If you search for time in Los Angeles as an example, you just see one result. So you used to get the featured snippet with the 10 blue links of Google below it. You no longer have that. You have a button that says show all results, but essentially Google is giving you the answer and no alternative options. And I look at this in two different ways. From the SEO perspective, that's really annoying because if you're number one, you've just lost traffic overnight because Google have a new idea to experiment with. If you're a searcher, I landed in Kiev yesterday. I wanted to know what the time was. I don't want 10 results. I want one right answer. And actually, from a searcher perspective, this is potentially a good thing because if you can get the answer quickly and easily, and then you've still got other options afterwards, if you don't agree with that, then potentially this is a good experience. I would say it's an experiment at this stage. You always have to look into what Google are trying to do, and they're running this not just to do it for this type of query, it will be rolled out more heavily if they see a good reason to do so. So it's something to be wary of, and if you're not that number one result yourself, then you could be losing all of the other traffic potentially in the future. Another thing is App Store optimization. So if you look at the growth of apps versus mobile browser usage, again, people are using mobile apps more than they are their own browser. So 19% versus 23%. 32% use both at different times. 24% I assume don't have smartphones because they aren't using either at this stage. But again, apps are really key. We've noticed a big demand in App Store optimization just over the last year. And the reason is obvious. If someone has downloaded your app, they don't need to go to Google. They don't see your competitors. They go straight to you. So it makes a lot of sense that people will try to get you on their app. And if that's what people want to use, generally you can't stop them from doing that. That's their own behavior. There was a prediction, I think this was from Martin Sorrell, who said that the future will consist of 15 apps, as in the core apps you use on a day-to-day basis. Amazon, Google, Facebook, Netflix maybe, and then 30 niches. So that could be the sports team you follow, local information, that's unique to you as a person. And again, when you think about future trends, having an app and being front of mind for everyone should be something that you have, if you haven't got already, you should certainly be thinking about that. So one prediction from ComScore, and I think Microsoft were also behind this, is that 50% of all searches will be voice in 2020. This was made last year. 2020 isn't that far away, so it's only 2 years, and 50% of voice searches, 50% of searches being voice, is huge. So if you want to basically capture 50% of traffic, you need to start thinking about voice search yourself. We've done some experiments on this, so creating Alexa skills, and I would definitely encourage people to be curious, to try new things, and to look to understand how you can capture voice search in the future and think about how that could relate to your brand. What questions are they asking on the web right now? And then think about how you can provide the best result for it, also for voice. So part of the reason there's so much optimism around this growth is 56.3 million smart speakers are expected to be launched, shipped in 2018, which is a huge number, and it just shows that the more people that have these speakers and devices in their homes, the more people will be searching, and again, the more important it is for marketers. The market share right now with voice, Amazon Echo is the leader with 69%, Google Home has 25%, and everyone else has 6%. And I think it's interesting to see that Amazon have had such a good head start. They have the distribution for sure in terms of getting the device to customers with Amazon Prime. However, my prediction is I think Google will probably win the long game. And the reason for that prediction is Google just knows so much more about search. That's their core business. And if you want to have a device that provides you with the best answer, Google, in my opinion, are most well placed in order to provide that. Amazon Alexa at this stage is still quite early, and it can frustrate people when you don't actually get the answer or it doesn't understand what you're saying. Also, very interestingly, are Apple potentially too late to the game? I think that there's a good chance that they are, and I would imagine that would be very disappointing for them. Certainly when you look back at the Steve Jobs days of them being kind of very early innovators. The HomePod has only just launched, but seeing that they had Siri for the last kind of 2 or 3 years or more, I would have expected them to have launched this much earlier, and I think that there's a good chance that maybe this is the sign of their decline, but potentially if they aren't quite at the same speed as Amazon and Google, personally I think they're a little too late. We'll see what happens. Another thing I find really interesting is looking at virtual and augmented reality, and the challenge I had with this a couple of years ago was I couldn't see how this would be relevant to marketers. I thought it would just be for people who are gaming. And I went to a presentation, I asked the presenter at the end of the talk some questions about actually what this means. His explanation was if, let's say I just landed in Kiev, I want to know where to go tonight. So I could ask the headset, where's the best pub, where's the best nightclub in Kiev? The headset will show me 2 to 3 options. It could be like people dancing on a dance floor or a bar, and that's much more visual than you'll ever get from a search result. Based on the reaction of your eyes, the virtual reality can see which result you prefer, like which are you really responding to. And that's really powerful because from a marketing perspective, if you switch it and look at how you can promote yourself, it's much more around actually how can you create that content that triggers the result, and how can you create the experience that makes their eyes light up when they see it. So if you can do that, you're going to be the one that's generating all of those visits into your pub or nightclub. And the same applies to property. If you're viewing a house, no one wants to go and see 10 houses to view on a cold day. They want to go and sit on their sofa, have a drink and put the headset on, and they can view all of those from the comfort of their own home. So again, this is thinking about what happens in the future. The key thing behind this will be how many people are using it. So if Apple, for example, decide they're really going to heavily promote headsets for their iPhone, it will become more mainstream and popular, and that means that everyone's going to start using it. So if people are using it more frequently, as a marketer, you want to be in front of that. The interesting thing about everything I've just shown you, none of these results require a website. And that means that you can ignore this and just focus on your website, but there's a lot of people who will find your competitors in different ways. So you want to be right in front of them if that's how people are behaving and searching. How can you be the winner? My advice to everyone is always keep learning. I've done this for 15 years. I'm not an expert. I don't consider anyone to be an expert in SEO. And that's because everything's changing. The moment you think you're an expert, you're not, because something new will be launched. And actually, always keep learning, always keep improving. And you have to balance that with what works today. I'm definitely not saying stop doing SEO, stop doing paid search and focus on voice. That makes no sense to anyone. But equally, it doesn't make any sense to ignore the future because that's where you can be completely left behind. So my suggestion is to take a small percentage of your activity and to put that behind future innovations. Test things out like Alexa skills and learn about where things are going so that you're not left too late. And finally, optimize for people, not search engines. Think about what people are doing. If they're on their phones, if they're using voice search, how do you get in front of them? If the number of searches on desktop is declining, the answer isn't always to rank higher on desktop. It's about thinking about where these people are and how you can connect with them in the place that they want to be. So, thanks very much. And
Thank you.
Happy to answer any questions.
Давайте похлопаем. У кого есть вопрос, можете на английском, на русском. Лучше на английском, я переводить не хочу.
Hi, Kevin. Thanks for the talk. Simple question. You mentioned voice search. Shall we start optimizing for screen readers? Or maybe you already run some experiments and you saw the difference?
The experiments we ran were around Alexa skills. So at this stage, we had to use a third-party app and create a skill that was responding to that question. So at this stage, I think if you can understand how to code an Alexa skill, I think that will put you very, very well placed. But yeah, okay, so.
I meant actually like a Google search. Whenever you say like, okay, Google search for, then it makes more sense for Google to give you the results that optimized for screen readers, because then kind of you get the best content instead of like Google reading through the web page and giving you bullshit info.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And again, if you are the #1 result for screen readers, then it's going to be very similar for voice search, but I think that there's clear differences in terms of how those results are sometimes being provided, so the certain skills that you have to set up as well. So I do think that's a good starting point for sure, but definitely have a look. There's some, if you're familiar with the website called Udemy, so U-D-M-Y, I think, or E-M-Y.
Yeah, we know
They have a very cheap course that can show you how to create Alexa skills as well. So just explore would be my advice.
Thank you. Кто еще вопросики? Да.
Thanks for the speech. I had just a quick question about, can you share any experiences where you try to optimize for voice search? Because obviously now with the big hype about it's coming next year's, can you just give a brief overview? How did it go? How did you? What was the workflow? And what did it involve? If possibly it didn't even involve your website.
Yep. So yeah. So the question was how to optimize for voice search, and what we've tried to do is to analyze the questions that people will be asking for our clients. That applies to the web as much as it does for voice, but the most popular ones you'll find are generally the ones that people are using with voice search. Voice search is very hard to do. You can't do keyword research around stuff like that. The information just isn't there yet. And I think if we wait until it is, we may be too late. So the advice is around using your own research to find the popular questions first. There's a very good tool called Answer the Public, which helps. If you put in a keyword, it will show you all of the popular questions around that one keyword. That's the first step. The second step is looking at how to code the different skills. So once you have that, and this is an example, we've done one, our one as an example was, who's the best SEO agency in the UK? And the response was, we like Blue Glass, they won the best SEO agency last year, we think they're good. So it's kind of a bit of fun just to practice with it. But I think at this stage, that's what it's about. It's trying to understand how you can code it, and as it picks up in popularity, you're then front and center.
Thank you. One more.
Hi, Kevin. So the next month, Google in Amsterdam introducing Google MP, the new era for the coding. What about in your opinion around Google MP in a new era for SEO?
Sorry, I didn't quite understand the question.
The question is, Google MP now is very important because the new coding for development to create a quick web pages or website is important to Google and like also for the user. Okay, your opinion is what about the new era for the search? Is it important to take Google MP into our project or not?
I would say so, yes. I think that I always try and look at the market and the market share. So if Bing, for example, has a large amount of searches, even if it's small compared to Google, you can sometimes find the quality is higher. I would try to take both into account. Certainly you have Bing Webmaster Tools as well as Google Search Console, so it's something to consider. And it's worth making sure you're optimized for both. In terms of what that means on a day-to-day tactical level, I still find if you're optimizing for Google, normally Bing can take care of itself, but certainly at least set up a Bing Webmaster Tools account, because you might find that actually your site's being crawled in a slightly different way that you wouldn't be aware of. So that would be my one tip. But every market's different in terms of which search engine has most popularity.
Thank you. Последний вопрос.
My question is it right to conclude that it's much more important to use local SEO optimization for being successful in those trends that you outlined? And the second part of it, what do you do if your product is not local but global?
Good question. I think on the local side, definitely. If you're searching for your local restaurant, then local search, voice search, etc. is probably likely to be much more important. Certainly, I don't know the exact percentage, but mobile intent for local searches or local intent for mobile searches is really high. And I think that is something you want to capitalize on. Within global brands, sometimes you can have a global search but localized results. So you can, we have a client in online dating. If I search for online dating in Kiev, I'm obviously going to get a completely different result versus the UK, but I'll also get a different result if I'm in London versus Manchester. So thinking about how you can have local content that appears for a competitive global phrase can help to position you much higher for those terms as well.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Kevin. Давайте поблагодарим Кевина.